Two hikers paused on a remote mountain trail when something caught their eye. A flash of faded pink peeked out from beneath the carpet of wet leaves and pine needles. Curious, they brushed aside the debris and pulled out a small, weather-beaten diaper bag. They assumed it was just forgotten trash, until they looked inside. What they found would crack open a 9-year-old mystery about a young mother and her little girl who had vanished without a trace. Emma Sullivan was a 29-year-old mother who adored her 2-year-old daughter, Sophie. Early one August morning, Emma buckled Sophie into her car seat, packed snacks and toys, and set off on a much-anticipated road trip. They were heading across state lines to visit Emma's parents, a drive that would take them through picturesque mountain roads. Emma's husband, Mark, kissed them goodbye in the driveway. He had to stay behind for work, but Emma was confident she could handle the drive alone. She loved the freedom of the open road and saw the trip as an adventure to share with her little girl. As the sun rose, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Emma pulled out of their suburban neighborhood with a smile. Sophie giggled in the back, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. It was shaping up to be a beautiful day. As they drove off, Emma glanced in the rearview mirror at her daughter. Sophie caught her mother's eye and babbled a few cheerful sounds, waving the plush bunny's paw. Emma laughed and waved back. In that precious moment, neither of them had a worry in the world. The highway ahead wound through thick forests and rolling hills. Emma turned on children's songs to keep Sophie entertained, singing along softly as the miles ticked by. She felt happy and at peace, just a mother and daughter on an exciting journey together. Nothing felt out of the ordinary. But unknown to Emma and Sophie, the journey that lay ahead would be anything but ordinary. This seemingly routine road trip was about to take a turn into darkness. It was a drive they would never finish. By late morning, Emma had driven several hours and decided to take a break. She pulled into a lone gas station in a small town at the foot of the mountains. Security camera footage later captured Emma smiling as she filled up the tank and carried Sophie on her hip into the convenience store. Inside, she let Sophie pick out a juice and bought herself a coffee for the road. Everything seemed completely normal. The clerk would later recall how polite and cheerful Emma was, chatting about the nice weather and her drive ahead. Before leaving, Emma phoned her parents to let them know she was making good time. She laughed, telling them Sophie was being a great little co-pilot. She promised to arrive by late afternoon. That phone call was the last time anyone would ever hear Emma's voice. Back on the road, a sign for a scenic detour caught Emma's eye. There was a winding mountain road that offered breathtaking views and would eventually reconnect with the main highway on the other side of the range. Feeling adventurous and ahead of schedule, Emma decided to take it. She didn't know that this choice would lead her deep into isolation. As Emma's SUV climbed into the mountains, the surroundings grew wilder. She realized she hadn't seen another car for miles. Towering pines and jagged cliffs flanked the narrow road. Cell phone reception faded to nothing. Around noon, sunlight filtered through the canopy as the road snaked higher and deeper into the wilderness. Emma rolled down her window to feel the crisp mountain air. In the back seat, Sophie dozed peacefully, clutching her stuffed bunny. It was quiet, too quiet. As mother and daughter ventured into the heart of the mountains, they had no way of knowing they were also leaving the last traces of civilization behind. They were now completely on their own. That evening, Emma's parents waited anxiously on their front porch, watching the driveway for headlights that never appeared. Emma had said she'd arrive by late afternoon, and as the hours passed with no sign of her or Sophie, worry began to gnaw at them. At first, they reasoned there might be a simple delay, maybe heavy traffic or a stop to let Sophie rest. But by nightfall, their calls to Emma's phone went unanswered, straight to voicemail. Back at home, Mark was growing frantic. He called his in-laws only to hear Emma hadn't arrived or been in touch. A cold dread settled over him. Emma was responsible and punctual. If she was running late, she would have called. Something was wrong. Mark wasted no time. He phoned the state highway patrol and local hospitals, asking if there had been any accidents or sightings of Emma's blue SUV. There were none. Desperate, he even got in his car and began driving the route Emma was supposed to take, headlights cutting through the darkness as he searched the empty roads. It was an eerie, endless night. Every set of approaching headlights raised his hopes, only to blip past in the darkness, leaving him alone again on the road. He felt utterly helpless. There was no trace of his wife or daughter. By the early hours of the morning, the family's worst fears had begun to solidify. Emma and Sophie were missing. When dawn broke without any word from her, Mark and Emma's parents contacted the county sheriff's office to officially report them missing. A joyous family visit had turned into every family's nightmare overnight. Emma and her little girl had vanished into thin air. The next morning, a formal search was underway. Sheriff's deputies, state troopers, park rangers, and volunteers rallied to find the missing mother and child. Word spread quickly through both the town Emma had last been seen in and the community at her destination. Strangers showed up to help, moved by the thought of a young mom and her toddler lost out there somewhere. Search teams started along the obvious route, the main highway Emma was supposed to take. Patrol cars drove slowly along the shoulder, and helicopters were dispatched to fly over stretches of road, scanning for any sign of a crash. Volunteers walked through roadside brush and checked down embankments, calling out Emma and Sophie's names. At rest stops and gas stations along the way, missing person flyers with Emma's and Sophie's photos were posted. It had only been about 24 hours since they vanished, and everyone hoped they might be stranded somewhere, waiting for help. Despite the swift response, that first day turned up nothing. Not a single piece of debris, no skid marks, no disabled vehicle by the roadside. It was as if Emma's blue SUV had simply evaporated. Frustration and fear mounted among the searchers. Mark joined the volunteers, tirelessly hiking through thickets by the highway, refusing to rest. By nightfall of the second day, there were still no clues. The mountains and forests they'd driven into remained ominously silent about where a mother and her little girl could have gone. Little did anyone know, the search was looking in the wrong place entirely. On the third day of the search, investigators dug deeper into Emma's last known whereabouts. By tracing her credit card activity, they confirmed she had bought gas and snacks at a station in the town just before the mountain pass. This prompted a crucial realization: Emma might have taken the scenic mountain road instead of the main highway. The focus of the search shifted to that winding, isolated route through the wilderness. Search crews now combed the edges of the narrow mountain road. This route was treacherous in places, with sharp turns skirting steep ravines and dense timber on either side. For hours, they found nothing, until a sharp-eyed park ranger spotted something near a particularly tight bend. It was a shard of blue-painted metal and fragments of glass caught in a tangle of weeds downhill from the pavement. The pieces looked like they could be from a vehicle's headlight or mirror. Heart pounding, the ranger called over the others. They carefully collected the broken fragments. The paint matched the color of Emma's SUV. Nearby, scuff marks were visible on the bark of a tree at the curve's edge, as if a vehicle had grazed it. These subtle signs suggested that a car might have careened off the road at this point. Rescuers peered down the wooded slope, shouting Emma's name. The ravine was steep and choked with thick underbrush. If a vehicle had plunged down there, it was virtually invisible from the road. Yet, this clue galvanized the team: they could be close. Ropes were fetched and a group of experienced search and rescue climbers prepared to descend into the ravine's shadows. Rappelling into the ravine was treacherous. A team of search and rescue climbers descended with ropes, inching their way down through tangles of vines and slippery moss-covered rocks. The forest floor below was dim and silent, a world of towering ferns and fallen logs that had likely not seen a human footprint in years. The searchers fanned out, scouring the slope for any sign of a vehicle, shattered glass, tire tracks, broken branches, anything. They found nothing. Hours of painstaking search turned up no SUV, no skid trail through the brush, no disturbed soil where a car might have slammed to rest. It was mystifying. Given the evidence on the road above, they were all but certain Emma's car had left the curve. But the thick forest seemed to have swallowed it whole. At the bottom of the ravine ran a swift creek, swollen by recent summer storms. The searchers wondered if the vehicle could have plunged into the water and been swept further downstream or buried under debris. Divers were called in to probe deeper pools, and cadaver dogs were brought to the creek banks, sniffing for any trace of human scent. Still, there was no trace of Emma or little Sophie. After several exhaustive days, the search in the ravine yielded only frustration. Aside from the fragments found up on the road, there were no other clues. Some investigators began to question if those car parts were truly from Emma's vehicle or just coincidental litter from an old fender bender. The mountain was not giving up its secrets. By the end of the first week, the massive search operation was scaled back. Mark, who had been on the mountain every day with the search teams, was shattered by the retreat. He pleaded with authorities to keep looking, even if only with a small team or on weekends. But as leads and resources dried up, he was forced to drive back home, utterly heartbroken. The search teams had to accept defeat for now. The police were left with a terrifying mystery: how could an entire car, IMOT? With no concrete answers from the search, investigators were left to theorize what might have happened to Emma and Sophie. The most plausible scenario was still an accident, that somewhere in that treacherous wilderness, Emma's SUV lay hidden beyond sight, with mother and child trapped or worse. But without evidence, alternative theories began to surface. One theory was foul play. Could someone have been on that remote road and taken advantage of Emma after a crash, or even caused it? Detectives looked into known criminals in the region. There were a few unsavory characters, but no evidence placed any of them near Emma's path that day. And nothing suggested a struggle or violence. There were no suspicious tire tracks, no signs of roadside confrontation. That route was nearly deserted. Another theory, whispered but painful for the family, was that Emma might have purposefully disappeared. Those who didn't know her wondered if a young mother might have been overwhelmed or unhappy enough to run away from her life. But those who knew Emma dismissed this out of hand. She was joyful, devoted to her family, and had been excited about the trip. She left behind her wallet, credit cards unused after the gas station, and all her personal belongings were still at home. It made no sense for her to vanish by choice. As weeks turned into months, every lead fizzled out. A long-haul trucker thought he saw a blue SUV matching Emma's on a distant highway, but it turned out to be another traveler. A hiker found a child's shoe in the woods, prompting a surge of hope, but it didn't match Sophie's size or style. Each new tip led to a dead end, deepening the family's heartache. The sheriff's department continued to sporadically patrol the area and follow up on any new information, but with winter snows coming to the mountains, the search was officially suspended. Emma and Sophie had simply vanished without a trace, and the case went cold. Mark and the rest of the family were left with grief and a horrifying uncertainty, no closure, no answers, just the lingering question of what happened on that mountain road. The seasons turned, and life in the Sullivan household changed in ways they never imagined. Mark woke up every day to an empty home, the absence of his wife and child an ache that never went away. Sophie's nursery remained exactly as it had been the day she left, pastel-colored walls, a crib full of stuffed animals, and her favorite picture books neatly on the shelf. Dust gathered on the untouched rocking chair. Mark couldn't bear to change a thing, clinging to the hope that someday his little girl might come home. Emma's parents struggled in their own way. They left the porch light on every night, just in case by some miracle Emma's car came rolling up the driveway. For years, they hosted a candlelight vigil each anniversary of the disappearance, gathering friends, neighbors, and even search volunteers who hadn't forgotten. At these vigils, they'd share stories of Emma's kindness and Sophie's laughter, praying for answers or a return that never came. The story of the missing Sullivan mother and child periodically resurfaced in the media. On every anniversary of their disappearance, local news stations ran segments recapping the case, with Emma and Sophie's smiling faces on the screen and a number to call with any tips. Mark would appear in some interviews, his voice quavering but resolute as he pleaded for any information and assured his wife and daughter, wherever they were, that he loved them and would never stop looking. Even as hope grew harder to hold on to, he simply couldn't let go. As year after year passed without any breakthroughs, the pain settled into a dull, constant heartache. Mark worked with private investigators and missing person advocacy groups, refusing to let the case fade from public memory. He set up a Facebook page dedicated to finding Emma and Sophie, posting updates, pleas, and photos of happier times. On Sophie's birthdays, he wrote letters to his daughter on that page, telling her how much he missed her and what she'd be like if she were here, all the while unsure if she was even alive to someday read them. As 9 long years dragged by in uncertainty, some feared the truth might never be known. To the family, though, Emma and Sophie were still out there somewhere, waiting to be found. Every ring of the phone, every news report of unidentified remains found in the region, sent their hearts racing with both hope and dread. And every time, it was never them. 9 years after that awful day, the family's wait was finally about to end. In the summer of the 9th year, fate was preparing to crack open the silence. The mountains that had guarded their secret for so long were ready to reveal a clue, one that no one saw coming. It was a warm summer afternoon, 9 years after Emma and Sophie disappeared. 2 hikers were trekking through a dense section of forest roughly 15 miles from the nearest town. The area was remote, not far from the base of the very mountain pass where the mother and daughter had gone missing. Recent heavy rains had eroded parts of the trail, exposing things that had long been hidden under leaf litter and soil. As the hikers navigated a mossy, uneven path, one of them noticed a flash of color amidst the browns and greens of the forest floor. "Hold on," she said to her friend, stepping off the trail. Half buried under wet leaves and dirt was something made of fabric, a bag of some sort. She tugged at it, and as clumps of mud fell away, the two realized they were looking at a small diaper bag, faded pink with cartoon animals on the front. It was dirty, water-stained, and had clearly been out in the elements for a long time. Puzzled, the hikers opened the bag. Inside, they found the remnants of what must have been a mother's supplies for a young child, a disintegrating pack of wet wipes, a tiny t-shirt sized for a toddler, a sealed jar of baby food long expired and leaking, and a little toy rabbit, matted and mud-streaked. At the bottom of the bag was a wallet. When one hiker carefully opened it, she drew in a breath. The ID inside was nearly illegible from water damage, but the name was still clear, Emma Sullivan. The hikers exchanged stunned looks as the gravity of the find hit them. They knew of Emma's story. Locally, it had become a legend, a haunting unsolved mystery. Hands shaking, one hiker pulled out her phone and managed to get a faint signal on the ridge. With trembling fingers, she called the authorities and reported what they'd found. They could hardly believe it. After 9 years of nothing at all, here, in the middle of the woods, was a piece of Emma and Sophie's life. The discovery of that weather-beaten diaper bag would finally crack open the silence of the mountains. It was the first tangible evidence of Emma and Sophie to surface since the day they vanished, and it was about to change everything. Within hours of the hikers' discovery, the sheriff's department and search and rescue teams were mobilizing once again. For the first time in nearly a decade, they had a fresh lead. The rugged area where the diaper bag was found became the epicenter of a new search. Yellow police tape marked off the site as evidence. Technicians carefully picked up the bag and its contents, treating them gently despite years of exposure. Word of the find spread quickly among law enforcement and to Emma's family. Mark received the call he had dreamed of and dreaded. Something of Emma's had been found. Dozens of personnel assembled at the mountain, determined to follow this clue to its source. The hikers guided deputies to the exact spot. From there, search teams expanded outward in systematic grids, combing through the forest with metal detectors, drones scanning from above, and dogs once again sniffing for scents of human remains. It didn't take long before another breakthrough came. In a shallow, rocky creek bed about half a mile uphill from where the diaper bag had been, a searcher spotted something out of place, the rusted underside of a vehicle, barely visible beneath a jumble of fallen logs and debris. Excitement and tension rippled through the team as they cleared the area. There, lodged in a hollow and camouflaged by moss and mud, was Emma's blue SUV. It had come to rest on its side, hidden so well that it was no wonder it had been missed all those years. Investigators approached the long-lost vehicle with reverence and caution. The windows were shattered, and the interior was filled with dirt, decayed leaves, and silt from countless rains. The driver's side door hung open, bent and ajar, as if someone had climbed out. The keys were still in the ignition. They found a dried dark stain on the driver's seat and steering wheel, likely old blood, hinting that Emma had been injured. But there were no human remains inside the car. The car told a silent story of a crash survived, at least initially. As the wreckage was documented and carefully prepared for removal, a sense of resolve washed over the team. They had found the car, but Emma and Sophie were still missing. The diaper bag's location and the car's position suggested that after crashing, Emma had carried Sophie downstream, perhaps following the creek in search of civilization. The searchers pressed on, hope and sorrow intermingling as they closed in on the final chapter of this tragedy. The search parties pressed further down the creek, fanning out in the direction it flowed. It was only a few hundred yards from where the diaper bag had been found when one of the cadaver dogs signaled. Its handler pushed through a thicket of brambles and came upon a mossy clearing beneath a large oak tree. What he saw stopped him in his tracks and brought tears to his eyes. There, on the ground, lay the weathered skeletal remains of an adult and a small child. After 9 years exposed to the elements, they had settled into the forest floor, partly covered by decades of leaf fall. Yet it was clear that this was a mother and her child. Rusty reddish-brown strands of hair, matching Emma's, clung to the skull of the adult. Tiny, fragile bones, little ribs and vertebrae, were entwined with the larger skeleton, as if the mother had been holding her daughter in her arms as they lay there. Not far from the remains, searchers found fragments of clothing, shreds of a once bright women's blouse and the sole of a toddler's tiny shoe. These items matched what Emma and Sophie were last seen wearing. It was them. After years of uncertainty, Emma and Sophie had finally been found, together, in the silence of the forest. One veteran searcher on the scene recalled that during the initial search years ago, he had traversed a ridge just half a mile away, calling out their names. The realization that they had been so close yet undetected for all this time was chilling and heartbreaking. Seasoned officers and volunteers alike wept openly as they carefully marked and documented the scene. They worked slowly, reverently gathering the bones and remaining artifacts. A child's femur bone no thicker than a finger. A piece of Emma's jewelry, her wedding ring, still on a knuckle of her left hand's bones, symbolizing the life she had hoped to return to. The atmosphere was heavy with sorrow but also relief. The 9-year mystery had at last yielded an answer, however heartbreaking. The mountain secret was revealed. Emma had survived the crash with Sophie and tried to carry her to safety. She made it as far as that oak tree, possibly injured and exhausted. In that spot, mother and child likely spent their last moments together, alone in the wilderness. Now they would finally be brought home. In the weeks that followed the discovery, investigators pieced together the final moments of Emma and Sophie's fateful journey. The evidence spoke at last. On that sunny afternoon 9 years ago, Emma likely took the downhill curve too fast or swerved to avoid something. The SUV careened off the road, tumbling out of sight and coming to rest in the creek hollow. Injured but alive, Emma freed herself and Sophie from the wreck. With no way back up the steep slope and no cell signal, she made the only choice she could, to seek help on foot. They followed the creek, Emma carrying her 2-year-old and the diaper bag of supplies. She trudged through unforgiving terrain, over rocks, through water, fighting pain and exhaustion. At some point, perhaps as daylight waned, Emma realized the heavy diaper bag was slowing her down. She set it aside, likely intending to travel lighter and move faster. That was the bag that would eventually lead rescuers to them, years later. A crucial piece of insight came from a discovery inside Emma's vehicle during forensic analysis. Tucked in the glove compartment, protected from the weather, was a handwritten note on the back of a gas receipt. In shaky writing, Emma had scrawled, "Crash at sharp curve. Heading downstream for help. Sophie okay? I'm hurt. We love you, Emma." It appeared she wrote it in case someone found the car before they were rescued, a message in a bottle left behind. Reading those words broke the hearts of everyone who saw them. Even in what must have been dire circumstances, Emma's thoughts were to comfort her loved ones and guide rescuers to save her child. Tragically, help never reached them in time. Based on the location and condition of the remains, experts believe Emma survived perhaps 1 or 2 days after the crash. She likely made camp under that oak tree for the night, trying to keep Sophie warm. But her injuries and the elements overcame them. Mother and daughter passed away there, embraced together beneath the forest canopy. For Mark and the families, the news was devastating yet brought a measure of peace. At the funeral service, which the community attended in droves, 2 white caskets lay side by side, a mother and her little girl finally at rest. Mark placed Emma's recovered wedding ring on top of her coffin, a symbol of promises kept even in death. Sophie's favorite stuffed bunny, cleaned of mud, was tucked beside her as she was laid to rest. At the service, Mark stood before the gathered crowd and through tears thanked the 2 hikers who had found the diaper bag and the officers who never gave up on the search. He spoke of Emma's love and courage, saying that she had died protecting the thing that mattered most to her in the world. In the community's eyes, Emma was hailed as a hero, a mother who gave everything trying to save her child. Though nothing could erase the pain of losing Emma and Sophie, knowing what happened to them offered closure. The haunting mystery was solved, no foul play, no more unanswered questions, only a terribly tragic accident and a brave mother who did everything she could to save her child. In their town and beyond, Emma's story became a somber reminder of the unpredictability of life and the enduring bond between parent and child. Local authorities even installed better guardrails and signage on that mountain curve, and searchers vowed to never give up on missing persons, no matter how much time passes. Emma and Sophie Sullivan's journey ended in heartbreak, but they were not forgotten. After 9 long years, they were finally brought home. In the end, a faded pink diaper bag lost in the woods became the voice that spoke for a mother and child who could no longer speak for themselves, telling the world the story of what really happened on that remote mountain road.